Hello, everyone. Today's an impromptu one. I was technically wasn't sure if I'm going to stream today, just because things got a little late. But I will do a short stream. Simulation Talk 288. Welcome, everybody, or welcome, Guru. Slowly getting up there. It's nice. Hello, everybody on TikTok. We'll let people arrive a little bit because I haven't notified anyone. Let's also start. I doubt we're going to have time to get into Discord today, but just in case, we can start one. Beautiful. Started the stage. We're on there. What's up, Nami? How many people at any given time is in our community? Kenny. Hello, hello. Thank you so much for letting everybody on, Guru. No, Guru, I appreciate you. Surface mode, liquid, diffuser. Okay. Good to see you, Guru. You're always on it, huh? I appreciate that. It's really lovely. Can you hear me okay, by the way? Somebody told me that maybe it was Discord. Does the sound okay? What's up, Agape? Agape love. Okay, so this is my I believe that our spiritual bodies are seated in heaven. Like the Bible says, we are seated in heavenly places and we came here to live in this physical body and we will go back. Beautiful belief. What is the topic today? That's a good question. Maybe we can talk about narrative, because Agape just brought up a narrative. Let's talk shortly about how narratives arise, how they develop, and what power they hold. What's up, Cellcam? Thank you so much for the likes. I appreciate you guys. Very nice of you. So yeah, I think our spiritual body is when we are unalived, right? So that's a narrative. That's a story that you believe in. Do stories become realities? That's also a common belief, right? What's up, Evil Icon? So I think that very clearly the answer to this question is yes, of course. But I think that there's another way of perceiving the situation that is geared towards what is the thing really? Because by all these, what's up, Jackie? By all these means, all these things that we're saying, like heaven, heavenly bodies, and we're going to go back there and, right? All of these concepts there, if they are real, then they are a something. They have a quality. They have a essence, and that essence, I think, is actually a lot more important than the stories we're telling about it. I do believe that there are stories that can approximate what the thing really is better than other narratives. But of course, the narrative itself can never reach the level of what the thing really is. And as I'm sure it's clear to, at least I hope, most people, the experience of the real thing can never compare to the story about it. So then the question becomes, what is the role of the story if, in fact, the story is just an approximation? And I think it's, well, there's a few things there. The first thing is that it probably gives us hope if the story is positive, or it gives us interest if the story is juicy. It gives us some thrust to take the next step. So if anything, I might be seeing stories as scaffolding towards whatever the truth is. What's up, Chronic Michael? Michelle Balboa. Thank you so much for all the likes. I appreciate that. And if we see it this way, I think it's clear that there is a certain responsibility we hold as story weavers to weave the kinds of stories that would not just move us in any direction, but move us in directions worth moving. And that part, I think, gets a lot less attention by us when we are navigating through these informational spaces. I love you, descriptors, Guru. Ebony is in the house. How are you? What's up, Nomiket? If you guys want to follow us on Twitch, it will be extremely helpful. The address there is LaserX83. That's our Twitch channel, so you can follow from there if you want to help the channel. Miss Matcha Tea. I love matcha as well. So narrative. What makes a narrative? Is it statements? Is it about a bunch of truth claims strung together in a particular order, which makes the narrative? Or is it more sophisticated than that? I think what makes a narrative is not truth claims, but emphases and context. And essentially, every single appearance of an informational, let's call it, piece inside of a narrative, inside of a story, plays a role not just in its appearance, but also in the exact position of the appearance of that bit of information in the narrative. So, for example, if I start describing somebody with particular properties, that means that I think that these properties are the ones that describe them the most. Otherwise, it would not be the first thing that came to my mind to describe about that person. Again, thank you so much for all the likes. I appreciate it. So when people speak about anything, they reveal their own emphases about the things that they're talking about. And usually when disagreements arise around, a particular story about what happened, it's not about the truth claims inside the stories, but about the emphases in the story. People emphasize one thing and another person felt like the emphasis should be on something else. And then they tell the other person that they're missing the point, or when it's what they're missing is that the person who's telling the story has a perception of the world that promotes particular elements and things and de-emphasizes others. And this promotion and de-emphasis is the constant weight balance of information that ultimately gives rise to the ebb and flow of a story. And that can be about a person, can be about an event, can be about history. But this brings me back to the original point that I was talking about, which is, what is it really? some people would say there is no what is it really? It's whatever the collection of what most people say about it. Well, I think that's demonstrably not true because there is, at least for the time being, there's something called the physical world, and whatever its ultimate. Thank you so much, Raindrop 555. Even if ultimately its essence is ephemeral and not physical as we believe it is, at least in our current moment-to-moment experience, it doesn't eliminate the fact that in the time period that you exist in this body, it does dictate quite a bit about what you can or cannot do. And I think that pointing to this fact is helpful because somehow we've convinced ourselves, and I do think that convincing ourselves of this is to some degree detrimental to the survival of the human species. It's almost like we have decided. Think about this. By saying there is no there, it's just what we decide it is. What you're essentially claiming is that there's only the map. There's no actual territory. I'm not sure if the drives behind these kinds of ideas are ultimately pernicious, but they certainly produce pernicious behavior in the people who hold these kinds of beliefs. It might not be apparent on the surface, but undoubtedly it's what always happens in the end. If you deny the territory its existence, you end up flying off a cliff because, of course, eventually there is a there, and you hit the wall or fly off a cliff that you didn't realize was there because you were under the impression that there is no terrain. Why is this important? And I know that you guys heard me emphasize this in different ways across lives and podcasts and interviews. Thank you so much, Guru. And I will address these points, Agape, in a moment. Agape saying, but you will testify also and be my witness because you have been with me from the beginning. What it is really is an invisible war for eternity. And if anyone is interested in seeing well, that's just another narrative. Now, it is not to say that the narrative is closer or further from the truth, but it is just another narrative. So it's another map that you're drawing. No, I would not say that what it really is infinite war. I mean, that's just forget about the fact that war is kind of like a human concept, right? You might want to talk about the flow of different energies, but war is definitely not. But even there, notice that even the negation of a truth claim is by itself a truth claim, like even what I said just now, right? So it is very tricky because how do we use language to point to something that isn't language? Now, I think we're doing it all the time. That's what language is. Language is just a signifier of some pure meaning of the intent behind what a person is saying. When you're saying words, there's something inside of you that emanates as some kind of an ebb and flow of energy, of wiggles that promote themselves constantly to the surface. And the ones that get your attention the most are the ones that convince you that you utter them next. But where does that come from? Where does that space, where is this space operating? What is the nature of that space? And I think the most important to recognize is that we really, truly, we have no idea. But what we do know is that it always happens inside of each and every one of us. One of the solutions that were given throughout history was, of course, the Buddhist solution, which is that you actually want to disassociate from the narrative entirely And the promise of this endeavor is that if you manage to do so, what you've been left with is what in fact is that nothing can be said about. And to a very large degree, I would say that I find this idea very convincing, also from a practice perspective. But I think it is also incomplete. I think that ultimately there is some reason as to why we can use symbolic representations, like in language, to signify deeper components of reality that are made out of pure information or pure meaning. And coming to terms with the fact that there is a usage for it, and there's some combination between paying attention to the inner purity of the meaning wiggles and the symbolic representation of those, there's a power there. There's an ability to bring into awareness things that one can only notice if, in fact, they are committed to utter that is true. And that's simply because when there's too much involved in terms of what the individual wants, you're no longer sampling from this purer space. You're sampling from a very superficial level of ideas you have that make you comfortable. And as I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, would agree that if you just stay where you're comfortable in your immediate pocket, you're not really going to grow. This spiritual growth is extremely important because it is the only direction we can take collectively that unifies us and everything else across all domains. It doesn't matter if you use the scientific reasoning, it doesn't matter if you come from a religious perspective or spiritual or really any set of ideas that you're proposing in this world. Ultimately, adhering to the truth of the matter is a unifying force. Because what it is asking is, what is it really? When Joe Rogan? Not sure. Hopefully soon. Thank you so much, Ebony. And yes, please come join our Discord. What's up, Joshua? Before I lose the train of thought, I don't want to ignore you guys' comments. I'm going to try and retain, kind of remember the place I was in. Don't get high, and neither does my security cameras. And I promise you that you have never anything like this. And I cast them out of my yard by a prayer and Bible verse. So I believe. Okay. So I think you're missing a few words there, but I think you're trying to say that you've seen some things and then you managed to cast them out. Is this referring to something else before? Yeah. So the fact that you have direct experiences of things does not mean that that is the ultimate state of affairs. Just to be clear. Email? You can always email me to lasersimulationx@gmail.com. lasersimulationx@gmail.com. Sure. Here it is. There you go. That's for all these matters. So let me go back to the point that I'm trying to make. But this brings me to my personal hope in humanity. My personal hope in humanity is in that we are capable of discerning what is it really. But the only way we can do that is if we approach the matter with as much of a neutral state of being as possible. And to get to this level of state of being, it does take some work. It's not an easy undertaking because it requires a lot of alignment with not just particulars in our minds, but also with invisible vibrational forces that are constantly moving through our bodies. It's the ultimate alignment of a lock. Body, mind, spirit, everything. But from that perspective, humans are currently on Earth the only ones that are capable of actually unlocking this key. But to do that, we need to embody a certain state of being that is both sharp-minded, clear thinking, and yet open-hearted. One that is truly listening at all times and ready to change the position despite any seeming immediate convictions of a situation. The Power of Now explains this very well, I would agree. It's one of the most influential books for me as well, so I highly recommend it. Eckhart Tolle. How can you believe in God's word written by mere men? God is the code writer. God wrote the Bible. Okay. So these are questions that obviously that can answer them in like a few seconds. Fairness is a word that comes to mind. I think very often people, when they weave stories, they're not being fair. Fair to what? Fair to others. I think in order to create truly a closest approximation to what the real thing is, we must instantiate the neutrality of the real thing into our stories. And for the most part, we're very not neutral with the way that we're telling our stories. There's always in our stories embedded all kinds of assumptions, things that we want to be true, that we state as true without knowing that they're absolutely true. It's almost like we're deciding for reality what it should be by saying the things we're saying, instead of listening to what it really is and then expressing that. And I think that the shedding of the ego is a big component, because when you do, then you can still have a particular collective narrative, but one that tracks and based on what the real thing is. Excuse me. Yeah, exactly. It's your belief. Excuse me. So the comments that I'm seeing now, I think they're good examples. You guys are mentioning things about the Bible and what God wanted, didn't want, what he write, didn't write. Let's start with a simple recognition. You don't know this. Let's start there. And if the insistence is no, I do, well, then that is exactly the kind of conversation ending moments that I'm talking about. That no matter how strong the conviction of whatever proposition you're bringing forth, and no matter how long you've lived with it, and no matter how much you have resting on it, if we want to be fair, we have to allow, it's up Halloween, always the possibility that what we're putting forth is not correct. And by the way, that's not the same as saying that what you are putting forth is not correct. It is simply the ability to not be attached to any story too strongly through the recognition that whatever in fact is true will be always available. Since it's true, if something is true, you can always point to it because it is true. So there's no concern about it slipping away since it is in fact true. And if you're in some descriptive relationship to that true thing, that is to say that what you're saying tracks what it in fact is to a large degree, then there's a security there. There's a power in expressing the thing that clearly is what it is. The second that there's any feeling of kind of like a shopping center buy now kind of vibe, it always means that you're in the presence of something that is not really tracking what it in fact is. Because you don't need to have a time limitation on something that is true. Something that is true, like truly true, is just there, is always there. Awesome, Agape. Um, knowing and believing in two different things. Yes. And I would say that you can't actually believe something you know. You If you know it, you don't believe it. That's a different state. I think that knowing is a state of being that one occupies. When enough conviction, enough familiarity is present with a particular thing, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be a person, it can be a process, it can be a truth claim, it can be anything. When we know something, there's a level of assert, assertiveness there. There's a level of forward-looking presence that doesn't exist with any other state of being. There's a confidence that comes with it. Not one that tries to express itself infinitely. Those actually tend to be the fake ones. It's one that carries itself in its totality in any given point in time and ready to be expressed for what it really is, and is not trying to assert itself infinitely without the need for it to arise. There's a famous phrase, I forget who is it by, but it's simply the truth does not require your participation. In other words, it is what it is no matter what you think, what you want. You have some relationships to it, of course, and you can be in a closer and further uh, relationship to it, descriptive, perceptually, whatever it is. But it is what it is by itself. It, as Terence used to say, it sets the agenda. Um, I'm trying to read through your comments quickly. It might be McKenna, but I think it might have been quoting someone else. But yeah, you might be right, Justin. I've noticed like a pen. How are you in Norman's term? The earphones makes me hear the sound better. So I see there's a lot of opinions here expressed very strongly, which is absolutely fine. So yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, Agape. The Book of Enoch. What's up, JMO? And I think that the relevance of this, because there's always these descriptors of things, right? You can say, well, what is a dog? And you say, well, the way you would, if you want to categorize it for like a child, so you would start describing a dog. Well, the dog is furry and it has 4 legs, but of course, all these criteria are shared by many different animals. The fact that there's 4 legs and there's fur, right? And then if you really go down the list, I guess you can say that you can give enough descriptors of the dog that would match only a dog and nothing else. But first of all, the amount of these descriptors is absurdly large in order to actually get to only a dog and nothing else. From whiskers to nose, and then different types, but there's different dogs, and and then you can maybe even go far down the rabbit holes. Like, well, you can describe them by the genome. Okay, that's true. The genome is pretty unique, so you can point to the dog from the genome perspective. But the dog is not the genome. The dog is a dog. It's everything that a dog is in the world. And, geneticists would say, no, it's just the expression of the genes. Of course, that's just the bias that they carry because, no, the dog, when you're playing with your dog, you don't care, think, or even know about the genome of the dog. That's not the thing you're interacting with. And then, of course, the instance, if you want to press the point forward, you would say, well, no, I mean, it's just that they're not aware that the dog is actually the genome. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize we're not aware. Well, the dog is a dog to another human who's experiencing the dog. And that is the instance in which it is a dog. You can say that ultimately maybe there's some perspective, like completely neutral of some all these different emphases of what the genome is not the dog, because the genome is what gives rise to the physical form of a dog in a physical world, but that's not what a dog is. The essence of what a dog is, that experience of a dog to itself, to other beings, to humans, is in that fullness of dog. Like that's what it is. And of course, from a scientific perspective that is reductionist, this doesn't make any sense, but that's because science is reductionist. It wants to reduce things to its parts, and there's nothing wrong with that. It gives us particular abilities that other thought forms don't. But knowing that will not help you enjoy the dog more. So it is good for certain things, but it's not good for other things. It's not relevant for other things. Talking about narratives. What's up, Aaron? How are you, brother? And ultimately, when you face this conundrum, what I'm starting to notice is that very often we lose ourselves in definitions, and we lose the essence of what the thing really is. But we have an innate, natural ability to perceive the essence of what things are. But because we convinced ourselves that unless we have an attached explanation that is reductionist in nature, that can break things to the parts out of which it's made out of, it does not fit the criteria of what we call real. It must be some, thin arising property in the universe that doesn't matter at all. But what's interesting is that, of course, direct experience of things, not just to humans, but to all beings in the universe, is the only thing that can ever matter. That's the essence of the universe. That's the essence of experience itself. So it's completely legitimate to think of the world as fundamentally, just completely just kind of like dead matter that doesn't care, like the old physicalist perspective. There's nothing wrong with that. I can easily imagine a world in which, yes, consciousness somehow weirdly arises, and some kind of a magic happens, and maybe behind it all there's no awareness at all. I happen to think that that's not the case, but it's not like it escapes me. How can one think of the world in this way? But what is, I think, pretty clearly escapes the people who think that that's the only way to see the world is in terms of that, is that if it's just objects banging into one another infinitely, I mean, by definition, it doesn't matter. It because nothing is experiencing it. And even if you want to kind of bite the bullet here and say, well, that's just the perspective of conscious things. Okay, well then think about this for a second. As opposed to what? As opposed from the perspective of things that can't have a perspective? It's very important because it gets to very deep levels of confusion very often. And by the way, that happens on all levels and in all different domains of exploration of this world, both in scientific and in spiritual. People get confused with this stuff very often. They start lumping irrelevant properties of things because they think of things only in terms of the definition that they already gave them. And I'm seeing a lot of examples here. Some examples you guys give, I personally agree with. Some of them I disagree with. But that part doesn't even matter. What does matter is that they're all points of view based on descriptors that you guys are giving them. Even in a simple statement like, we are fill in the blank, bodies of light, this is a holy, whatever. All of these words attached to some kind of a concept you have inside of you that you are naturally entertaining, that to you, because it's the water you swim in, you don't even realize those are just ideas. It's not what the real thing is. Funny enough, mentioning a dog, I've noticed recently, which maybe you guys noticed this a long time ago, but to me it was almost like a revelation. Then when I pet my dogs without saying anything, it's a different experience. If you have a dog, try this. So like instead, because most of the time we pet our dogs and we kind of go, oh my God, you're so cute, all of that stuff. And we attach a voice to the dogs. Oh, so cute, right? So we're like, there's a cuteness element we're bringing by saying these things. But if you allow yourself, and I'll tell you right away, it is kind of difficult to do. Try and pet your dog without any of the sounds, or even try and just not project your ideas on the dog. That's even harder. But just pet the dog. Just be in the moment. Look at the dog in the eyes. Look at how they're looking at you. Absorb what they are, their essence. You will discover something new. It is actually a little psychedelic. It's kind of wild. Because they are none of the things you think they are. We always have this question, like, what are they really like inside? We have no idea. I don't even think we have good approximators. We have all these concepts, but like, they're some kind of an animal with like their own kind of like internal space that we can't really fully grasp. I mean, I would assume it's some kind of a rudimentary version of, an early human or something. But we have no idea. But if you just allow yourself to be with whatever is happening in that moment, there's a certain gaze they would give you with their eyes. There's definitely a purity there that is very interesting. There's a character. There's a who they really are. And I would say that even with humans, we rarely do this. But with your dog, it's a little easier because the dog is truly neutral. Like, they actually have very little writing on anything happening. They don't want anything from you. They're just, so with the dog, it's actually a little easier to do. With the person, it's going to be a lot harder to do. But that's the kind of essence I'm talking about. And my claim is that beyond the stories, everything in existence has this essence. Every single thing. Pizza, the color red, trains, anything, a grain of sand. They are the things that we can put them in, the descriptors we could, the bins, descriptive bins we can put them into. So, like, sand is just blah 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 blah. It's just this process, and then this falls apart. Like, they're not just anything. They are what they are. But there is also the relationship it has to other things, which is where the description comes in. But I think there's going to be a lot, we will do a lot more good work in this universe if we are to remind ourselves that there is an essence to things. And that essence very often matters more than the descriptions we give these essences, these essential components, these essential energies of things. And even the idea that there's, when I'm saying essence, I think that for some people they might think of, like, oh, there's like a spirit to it, right? But that's you putting a word again. Forget about all that. Just be with something. It's also why, I guess, when you're doing psychedelics and you just look at the waves of the ocean, a lot of things become apparent about the world, right? Because there's a flow to the waves that explains certain natural truths about the world, because they are the world unfolding. And this process of the world unfolding is emanating in every single thing. And of course, what I'm saying, it's nothing new, but it really stood out to me because I've recently had to notice a lot of debates and disagreements about things that really there should be no debate or disagreement about. People try to define things in terms of their properties without referring to the thing itself. And I do think that even though reductionist science is an important tool that we do have, and it does help us with many things, there can be a situation in which it oversteps its boundaries as the tool that it is, and the tool tries to consume everything else because it is superior in so many different ways. And on the other hand, I think we would be wise to remember that the fact that we can do the differentiation between things and how they all fit and all the different relational values that things have, this also has an essence. This process, this ability to understand, to know, to generate knowledge, it also has an essential component. It also has an essence. And I think that is actually the human essence. And it is the gift and the responsibility we carry in this corner of the universe. Let me see. I think Justin is saying you're speaking some real truth here, brother. I remember the first time I inhaled the molecule, everything people had told me about it, all the reading I had done on it, everything I understood about how it interacted in the brain, etc. None of that mattered. It was almost laughable, like a distant story told about a tiny world of molecules, things we can't see but obviously have a relationship to the world we interact with. In that moment, the only thing that mattered was what I was feeling. I'm assuming you went to say in the space. First of all, it's beautifully written. I'm actually going to save this. It's really nice. I like it, Justin. Thank you. Took a picture of this. It's beautiful. And I fully agree with this, especially with the molecule. It's very clear. All the descriptors, they all collapse. Even if you can be super knowledgeable about it, but the second it comes on, you go, whoa, none of it compares. Not even close. You realize how wrong you were about the things you thought you knew. Because it doesn't even, not even a little bit. Yeah, see, this is another idea, Agape. Saying everything you have been taught and this world is a lie. It all formed to indoctrinate you, brainwash you, and keep you in the bottom. No offense, but notice the hubris of your statement. What it implies is that everybody were fooled but you. You're the only one that escaped the fooling, and you figured it out. You see the lie. Which again, of course, it's not. I do not mean to offend in any shape or form, but if you look at it closely, and I do encourage you to do so, these kinds of statements, they're defense mechanisms. They are, you can't fool me because I see the lies. Well, would you be comfortable with the idea that nobody is brainwashing you or trying to lie to you, and really it's just the natural state of affairs? The scariest idea is that nobody's in control. Now, I'm not saying, again, this is not to make a truth statement, but what you just said is a form of, it's an idea you have about what you think is going on in the larger picture, which of course nobody can possibly know, that it's outside of the scope of what anybody can do, even in principle. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's important to notice this, because otherwise you're tying yourself into a knot that you really don't need to do, because you live in a very comfortable world. I mean, I don't know you personally, but if you live anywhere in the Western world, you literally live in paradise. So complaining actually doesn't make any sense. And yet, people complain all the time. The Discord, I mean, we can hear it. I even forgot that I started it. If you go to Discord and you raise your hand on a stage, then I can bring you on and you can chat. But if you are doing that, today we're a little bit short on time, but just make sure that the topic is really interesting, juicy, something that would interest a lot of people. Just personal stories won't cut it, just to be clear. Just like if you have a story about an experience you've had, unless it had some deeper lesson, I would say that's not of interest to most people. Um, Also, Agape, I think you said you emailed me. I don't really see an email from you. Let me make sure that I spelled mine correctly. Laser Simulation X. Yeah, correct. Laser Simulation X at gmail.com, but I don't see an email from you, so not sure. Josh is saying religion, mainly Catholicism, is just a form of control of the masses and a manipulation of the truth. Dan, do you know who David Icke is, or anyone here ever listen? Yeah, and I personally don't find him that interesting. I'll be honest. I think that this kind of narrative of like just be worried about this, worried about that is not helping anyone. And I know if you really like, I had this conversation on the podcast, and the host really liked David Icke, and I said, I don't find the kind of narratives that just warn you about everything helpful. I think that aiming towards better ideas is the way to go, and you can let the rest fall, and you know, on or where it needs to fall. Like as long as you put your best foot forward, you actually don't have to worry about a thing. That's my philosophy. Also, yeah, blah blah. I don't check my TikTok messages. There's just too many of them. So if you're just a TikTok message, probably not going to see it. You can email me to lasersimulationx@gmail.com, lasersimulationx@gmail.com. And I appreciate you too, Agape love. Again, you know, it's it's almost like I see it as a style of being in the world. It's all styles of being in the world. Some people really like the did you hear narrative, you know? It's very juicy. It's very like, "Oh my god, you will never believe it." I think that when you I don't know if it's necessarily more or less evolved. I'm not even talking about it in this way, but like at least for me, the more I understand about what actually matters, the more you live, you kind of understand what how you want to spend most of your time, and then you realize, well, I think it's a wise thing to spend more of my time, more of the day, in a calmer state and in peace. And you don't always have this privilege, of course, depending of who you are, where you are. But to the extent that you can do that, you always should, because for the most part, whatever things you think being aware of helps the situation, uh, almost always it doesn't help at all. It's just another person being stressed about something. I promise you that actually, if you try and occupy that state more often, then when a moment arises in which you can actually do something about something that matters, it would actually be easier to do because you would have more of your full capacity to engage with it. Did you hear Wolfram crashed out? Crashed out in what way? Also good to see you, Nico. Casey, how are you, brother? Wow, I haven't seen you in a while. So good to see your name here. How are you, my man? So I think I think it's about what I have on narratives. I think beyond this point, we're just gonna kind of be going in circles. To summarize it shortly, I think what I would like to encourage more and more, and it's also I think a reminder for myself that I want to do this more, is uh, try and attach ourselves a little bit less to the narratives. It's not they're not important, but like they're not that important. In other words, if you think that what you believe about the world is so important as to, you know, you have to drop this 5-10 minute speech at a family dinner about whatever it is when nobody brought it up, you just decided to do it, and everybody were having a nice dinner, and now you kind of, you know, dropped the bomb or whatever because you thought it was important to talk about it. mm, I'm not so sure you did the world any favors, because it's the peace of mind that matters ultimately for most beings. So unless it's something that can directly influence the next moment of the state of affairs, the right moments for the right action usually declare themselves pretty clearly. Or at least that would be my contention. A little bit slower for sure, yeah. Had a lot of movement today. Um, Fluffy wolf attack. It's very funny. All right. I think I think we'll slowly adjourn for today. It was it was a pretty slow pace, but it was lovely. See, it feels better than ruffling feathers, but sometimes ruffling feathers is also fun. Good morning from Switzerland. Awesome, Fluffy Wolf attack. Um, if you want to follow me across platforms, it will be Danny Goller on Instagram and TikTok. It will be Goller Danny on X, LaserX83 on Twitch, and Dango Thoughts on YouTube. can join my membership program on YouTube that includes early access to all my content, weekly lives for members only that are aside from the daily lives. We dive much deeper into topics there. And if you sign up from the second tier up, it will include monthly Zoom calls with me, and one is coming up. I know I promised to send the invite today. I didn't have time today. Today was just way too swamped. I'll probably do it tomorrow. But if you sign up, make sure you also email me to lasersimulationx@gmail.com. Then you sign up for the second tier and up, and I can include you in our invite for the Zoom call. Aside from that, please come join our Discord group. It's a wonderful community of like-minded people who exchange these ideas. You can find the link to that both on YouTube on the main page, and Guru is putting it in the description right now, and also in TikTok and my Linktree. If you still want to donate to the film, you can do that. We're in post-production now, but we're still taking donations because it helps the post-production process. You can find the trailer of the film called The Discovery on the YouTube channel Dango Thoughts. And in the description of the video, you will find the GoFundMe page. If you contribute over $1,000, that's very generous. You will be one of the people that will watch the film for the first time ever in the world together with us. I know it's a big pool, but if somebody can do it and it's not a problem for you, join the family. That would be awesome. The Discovery, yes. You can find the link to it also in my Linktree in the description right here. What else? Go check out our website, codeofreality.com. We have our merch, all the good stuff, all the details about the laser and the protocols. And I would like to acknowledge our incredible moderators, without which this would be very difficult. Guru, I appreciate you. Ebony, deeply appreciate you. Thank you so much. Chris, too, and Jessica, just not with us tonight, but I really, really appreciate and love you. Thank you so much. Would like to appreciate and mention all the community members. You guys, without you, this is impossible. You are actually making this community what it is. All the old timers and the new timers, I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for making the dream real. And I will see everybody tomorrow. Peace and love, everybody. Ciao. Have a good night, guys.